want to share a story with you, dear listeners, not for any reason other than to unburden my heavy heart and to warn others not to make the same mistakes I did. My name is Elizabeth, and I'm 37 years old, a principal at a well-known elementary school in the city. My husband, James, 42, is the CEO of a major state-owned company, still in the prime of his life, strong and capable. We have 2 children. Our daughter, Chloe, 20, is studying at the University of Economics, and our son, Ethan, is a 10th grader at the prestigious Westview High School. For the past 3 months, I've felt a growing distance between James and me. My needs in the bedroom have always been strong, especially at this stage of my life, but lately, James has been different. When we're intimate, it feels rushed, like he's just going through the motions, as if he doesn't even want to be there. Some nights, he uses work as an excuse, leaving early in the morning and not coming home until late. When he does return, he heads straight to his private room on the 3rd floor, barely acknowledging me. I couldn't understand why he was so cold. He's only 42, still in his prime. I tried asking close colleagues at his company, but everyone, including his assistant, a young man named Mark, insisted that James wasn't involved with anyone else. If there was no third party, then what was causing this rift between us? My suspicions eventually turned to Sophie, the 17-year-old maid who lives with us. Sophie came from the same rural hometown as me. When she first arrived in the city 2 years ago, she was just 15, skinny and dark-skinned, like a dry twig. But after 2 years of living comfortably with us, she's transformed into a city girl, dressing in stylish clothes, using makeup, and even wearing perfume. I've caught her giving James longing looks, and he often chats with her in a warm, overly familiar way. Last week, when James returned from a business trip abroad, he brought Sophie a pair of expensive designer earrings. It's not unusual for an employer to buy a gift for their maid, but a luxury item like that? It felt suspicious. I started to believe there might be something secretive going on between them. Our house has 3 floors. The first floor has the kitchen, dining room, bathroom, garage, and Sophie's room, so she can easily handle cooking, cleaning, and keeping an eye on the house. The second floor has the living room, my and James's bedroom, and the kids' rooms. The 3rd floor is James's workspace, complete with office equipment, filing cabinets, and a small room where he rests on late nights. I began noticing that on the nights James came home late, claiming to be busy, he'd stop by Sophie's room before heading upstairs. I'd hear the car pull into the garage, but it would be a while before I heard his footsteps on the stairs. What were they doing in that time? The question gnawed at me, growing into a burning suspicion that made my stomach churn. After much thought, I decided to set a trap to catch James in the act. I planned everything meticulously, ensuring there'd be no escape. I didn't want to confront Sophie and fire her or make a scene. I just wanted to catch them and warn them. If this got out, it would be humiliating. Our family has a certain reputation in society, and I didn't want to hurt the kids or destroy our family over this. I confided in my mother, Margaret, about my plan. She nodded, saying, "If you don't catch them red-handed, they'll never admit it. But don't make a big fuss, just handle it between you and James. Don't let the kids find out." I assured her I'd keep it discreet. That evening, James called to say he'd be late, entertaining clients. After dinner, I turned to Sophie and said, "My mom isn't feeling well tonight. Her blood pressure's high, and my brother and his wife are on vacation, so she's alone. I'm worried about her. Why don't you go stay with her tonight and help her out?" I arranged a taxi to take Sophie to my mother's house, quietly instructing the driver, "Don't stop for anyone or let anyone get in or out until you reach the address I gave you." As soon as the taxi left, I called my mom. "The taxi's on its way, Mom. Make sure you unplug the landline. Sophie loves to chat, and if she calls someone, our plan will fail." That night, I prepared myself carefully. I showered, made myself smell nice, and even sprayed on some of Sophie's perfume, which I found in her bedside drawer, to mimic her scent. Then I turned off the lights in Sophie's room, lay on her bed, and waited, my heart pounding with a mix of nerves and curiosity. Around 11 p.m., I heard James's car pull into the garage. The gate creaked, the car rolled in, and I heard the garage lock click. A moment later, the door to Sophie's room opened softly. In the darkness, I saw the silhouette of a man in the doorway. He took off his shoes, shed his clothes, and climbed into bed, wrapping his arms around me. His lips met mine, and I knew instantly it was James. I thought, well, I've come this far, I might as well go through with it. But then I froze in shock. Something felt different, more intense than usual. Our bodies moved together, our hearts racing in sync, the room silent except for our shared breaths. It had been so long since I'd felt this kind of passion. I melted into the moment, overwhelmed by the heat between us. But then a thought struck me. He's so different with someone he thinks is a stranger, so passionate, like a storm, while with me, he's always so half-hearted. Anger surged inside me, but I held it back. Suddenly, he spoke. It's not like this is someone new. You're acting so eager. It's still the same old thing. Let's see who you'll hide from when I turn on the light. I smirked to myself, thinking, just wait until he sees it's me. Afterward, I reached for the lamp on the bedside table, ready to confront him. The light flicked on, and I said triumphantly, "Caught you cheating." But my words caught in my throat as horror washed over me. The man beside me wasn't James, it was Ethan, my son. "Oh my God, Ethan, how could this be you?" I gasped. Ethan looked just as shocked, staring at me, the woman he'd just been intimate with, his own mother. I burst into tears, leapt out of bed, and ran to my room, slamming the door behind me. I locked myself in the bathroom, the sound of running water mixing with my sobs. It had been so long since I'd felt such ecstasy, but now it was tainted by shame and guilt. Ethan was up by 6 a.m. the next morning, unable to sleep. At 15, he was no stranger to intimacy. He'd been with others before, but nothing had ever felt like this. The sensation lingered, a mix of euphoria and confusion that kept him awake until dawn. After getting ready, he went downstairs to the kitchen, looking for Sophie. Not finding her, he checked the living room, still no one. He figured James, Chloe, and I were still asleep, as our family usually gathered for breakfast around 7:45. But where was Sophie? He couldn't understand how she'd turned into me last night. As he entered the kitchen, he saw me cooking. "Good morning, Mom," he said softly. "Good morning, Ethan," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, not turning to face him. He sat at the dining table, glancing around awkwardly. The silence between us was suffocating. Finally, he broke it. "Where's Sophie, Mom?" I answered calmly. "My mom was sick last night, so I sent Sophie to take care of her." "Oh, I see," he said, falling silent. He understood why Sophie wasn't there, but he still couldn't grasp why I'd been in her room, or why, when he'd been intimate with me, I hadn't resisted. Instead, I'd responded eagerly. He had so many questions but didn't dare ask. I kept my focus on cooking, but I could feel his eyes on me. At 37, I still took care of myself. My figure was slender yet curvy, my movements graceful. Ethan had always respected me as his mother, a figure of authority, but after last night, he saw me differently. He noticed how attractive I was, the soft fabric of my morning dress clinging to my body, highlighting every curve. As I bent over to grab something, he caught a glimpse of my purple lace underwear, and the memories of last night flooded back, stirring a burning desire in him. He tried to shake it off, picking up a basket of vegetables to help me prep, but his gaze kept wandering. I knew he was watching me, but I couldn't bring myself to look at him. My mind was a mess. I'd cried all night, unable to believe I'd made such a horrific mistake with my own son. Thankfully, James had been sleeping in his office lately, so he hadn't noticed anything. But I couldn't stop wondering why it had been Ethan in Sophie's room. He was only 15. How could he be so experienced, so skilled, like a grown man? He'd made me feel things I hadn't felt in years, sensations that still lingered, making my body tremble. If it had been James last night, or even a stranger, and I'd realized it was Ethan sooner, maybe things wouldn't have spiraled so far. My head felt like it might explode. Breakfast was ready soon after, and I went to the bathroom without a word to Ethan, hoping last night was just a nightmare. Ethan, seeing me leave and knowing James and Chloe were still asleep, felt a sudden urge to follow me. After a moment of hesitation, he crept to the bathroom door, bent down, and peered through the keyhole. I was still dressed, cleaning the toilet, but his heart raced at the thought of seeing more. Last night, he'd experienced me fully in the dark, but now he wanted to see everything. When I finished cleaning and stood up, I began undressing. Ethan watched, breathless, as I stood in just a black bra, my pale skin glowing. Then I turned toward the door, and he saw everything he shouldn't have. I finished showering, slipped on pink underwear, and stepped out of the bathroom. Ethan quickly pulled away, his mind racing. At breakfast, I acted as if nothing had happened, chatting with the family as usual. Ethan tried to stay calm, but his eyes kept drifting to me, noticing the way my hair was pinned up, revealing my elegant neck, my gentle features that belied my age. No one would guess I was 37 with 2 grown children. After breakfast, Ethan helped me clean up, and I whispered, "Stay back a bit after you're done, I need to talk to you." "Okay," he replied, his voice tinged with nervousness. By 7:15, the driver arrived to take James to work and Chloe left for school. It was just Ethan and me in the house. We sat in the living room, the tension between us palpable. I struggled to find the right words, but before I could speak, Ethan broke the silence. "Mom, last night wasn't your fault, it was mine. I didn't look closely and did something awful. But I still don't understand why it was you in Sophie's bed, not her. I've been with Sophie before many times. We both wanted it, so what's wrong with that?" I was stunned. "How could you, Ethan? She's older than you." "I'm grown up too, Mom," he said. "It's normal for guys my age these days. She's only 2 years older, and we both agreed to it. What's the big deal?" I sighed. "I understand, but you still haven't answered my question. Why were you in her bed, and why didn't you stop me or react when you realized it was me? You even went along with it." I burst into tears. "I thought it was Dad," I admitted, sobbing. Ethan began to piece it together. I'd set a trap for James and Sophie, but it had backfired, and he'd been the one caught instead. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he said. "Let's forget it ever happened. Can we pretend it was just a dream?" "I can't forget it, Ethan," he replied. "Last night was the most incredible moment of my life. I've been with other women, but nothing felt like that." "Don't say that." I cried. "What we did was wrong. It's incest, a terrible sin." I stood, trembling, and moved to the sofa. Ethan followed, sitting close to me. His warmth made me shiver, and I scooted away, trying to maintain some distance. But he pulled me into his arms, saying, "Mom, don't push me away. Let's make this dream last a little longer, just one more time. We can pretend it's still a dream." "No, Ethan, we can't," I pleaded, but the scent of him, fresh from his shower, overwhelmed me. I felt like I was under a spell, unable to resist as our lips met again. I let out a soft moan, surrendering to him completely. The mix of shame and ecstasy overwhelmed me. My mind screamed that this was wrong, that I had to protect my dignity as a wife and mother, but my body betrayed me, craving the passion I'd been denied for so long. James had neglected me, and now, in my prime, I was starving for affection. I couldn't fight the desire any longer. The pain of that moment, as intense as my first night with James, tore through me, but I couldn't stop. Tears streamed down my face as Ethan, seeing my anguish, paused, his heart aching for me. Afterward, I lay there, exhausted, the afterglow of our sin lingering in my body. Ethan lay beside me, whispering, "I'm sorry, Mom." Tears rolled down my cheeks. I felt humiliated, unable to speak. "You are amazing, Mom," he said softly. "Don't say that." I snapped, my voice breaking. "Just go get ready for school. You'll be late." He nodded, kissed my forehead, and left to shower. I called the school to say I wouldn't be in, then locked myself in my room, sobbing. In just a few hours, I'd experienced both heaven and hell. Ethan was late for school, and the gates were already closed. The guard wouldn't let him in, so he went to a nearby cafe, sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone to kill time. By 9 a.m., he figured no one would be home, James at work, Chloe at school, and me at school. He assumed Sophie would be back by now. Paying his bill, he hurried home, eager to see her. But when he arrived, he saw my car still in the garage. She must be too tired to go to work after this morning, he thought. He went to Sophie's room, the door still unlocked from last night, but she wasn't there. Memories of his times with her and last night with me flooded back as he stared at her bed. He wandered to the kitchen, still finding no one, then went upstairs to his room. Lying on his bed, he couldn't stop thinking about me, the desire stirring again. He got up, went to my room, and tried the door. It was locked. He paced the hallway, debating whether to knock, but feared I wouldn't answer. Then he remembered the spare key James kept in his office drawer. He'd seen it once by chance. Excited, he ran upstairs, grabbed the key, and returned to my door, praying I hadn't locked it from the inside. The key turned, and the door opened. I was lying in bed, awake, my mind a storm of guilt and confusion. I'd made a terrible mistake last night, and this morning, Ethan had taken advantage of my vulnerability again. I couldn't stop thinking about how much I'd enjoyed it, how he'd made me feel things I'd never felt with James. If only we could be together openly, I thought, then shook my head, horrified at myself. The door creaked open and Ethan peeked in. "Ethan, why aren't you at school? What are you doing in here?" I exclaimed, startled. "I got sent home early," he lied. "I saw your car and got worried. I thought something might be wrong." "I'm fine," I said. "Go back to your room. I need to rest. I'll call you if I need anything." But he didn't leave. "I'm not busy, Mom. I don't have classes this afternoon. Let me stay and talk. I don't want you to feel lonely." Before I could protest, he closed the door and sat on the bed. I sat up, clutching a pillow, eyeing him warily. "Last night and this morning," he began. "Don't bring it up," I interrupted. "It was a mistake. I thought you were your dad. Let's pretend it was a dream and forget it." "But this morning wasn't a dream," he pressed. "Stop it, Ethan. Leave. I can't forget how amazing it felt, Mom. I saw your beauty, and those moments, I'll never forget them. Don't you feel the same? We were so good together." "No, Ethan. Don't come closer," I begged, my voice trembling. "I feel so guilty already." He moved closer, trying to comfort me. "Don't be scared, Mom. I love you. There's nothing to fear." "I'm terrified," I admitted. "What if your dad finds out?" "He won't," Ethan whispered. "No one will know. We can just enjoy these moments when we're alone." I shook my head, tears welling up. "It's wrong, Ethan. It's incest. We've already done it twice. Don't make it worse." He smiled slyly. "It's not cheating, Mom. We're just exploring new feelings. When Dad's around, everything goes back to normal. Nothing changes." His words started to sway me, but I fought against them. "No, Ethan, we can't. I feel so guilty toward your dad." My voice broke as I pleaded with him to stop. But he wouldn't listen, and soon we gave in again, my resistance crumbling under the weight of my own desires. When it was over, I looked at him, a shy smile on my face, filled with both satisfaction and shame. It had been a month since I'd felt this alive, but the guilt was unbearable. "I'm going to shower," I said softly. Just then, the doorbell rang. Ethan quickly dressed, tidied up, and went to answer it. It was James. "Hey, Dad," Ethan greeted. "You're home early." "I'm just stopping by to rest," James said. "I've got a party tonight." "Is your mom home?" "Yeah, she's showering," Ethan replied. James mentioned he and I were attending a farewell party for his friend Victor, who was moving to the US with his family. Victor and James were old army buddies, and I was close with Victor's wife, Clara. Their son, Daniel, 18, was also friends with Ethan. James asked if Ethan wanted to join us, but he declined, not wanting to feel like a kid tagging along. That evening, James and I arrived at Victor's lavish District 7 villa. The party was lively, but the noise overwhelmed me, and I felt a headache coming on. I stepped out to the garden for some fresh air. "Hi, Mrs. Elizabeth." "It's been a while," a voice called out. I turned to see Daniel, a handsome young man I hadn't seen in a year. "Oh, Daniel, you've grown so much. I almost didn't recognize you," I said, still a bit flustered. "Why didn't Ethan come?" he asked. "He's grown up now. He doesn't like tagging along with us," I replied, blushing slightly as I thought of Ethan. Daniel looked at me, his gaze lingering. He remembered a moment from a year ago when he was 17, tutoring Ethan at our house. He'd arrived early, let himself in with the key Ethan had given him, and heard strange noises from my room. Curiosity led him to peek through the window, where he saw me, alone, watching something on TV and touching myself. He'd been shocked but couldn't look away, overwhelmed by my beauty. That memory had haunted him ever since, fueling a forbidden desire. Back in the present, Daniel invited me to a quieter room to listen to music, away from the party's noise. For some reason, I agreed. He poured us each a glass of orange juice from the fridge. As I answered a phone call, he slipped something into my drink. After a few sips, I felt dizzy, my vision blurring. "Daniel, what did you put in my drink?" I slurred. "Just a little something to help you relax," he said, stepping closer. My mind clouded. I mistook him for James, and when he kissed me, I kissed back. But a flicker of clarity broke through. I realized what was happening and pushed him away, furious. "How dare you?" I shouted, slapping him hard across the face. The drug's effects wore off quickly. It must have been expired, and I stormed to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. Looking in the mirror, I felt a wave of relief that nothing more had happened. I fixed my makeup and stepped out, only to see Daniel chatting with James as if nothing had occurred. "Hi, Mrs. Elizabeth," he said casually. "Where were you?" "I was getting some air," I replied coldly. "Are you okay?" "Need any help?" he asked, his tone infuriatingly calm. "No, thank you," I snapped, then softened my tone, not wanting to cause a scene. I whispered to James that I wasn't feeling well and wanted to go home. He said goodbye to everyone and we left. The cool night air helped clear my head, and I vowed to put the incident behind me. Daniel would be leaving soon anyway. That night, I realized my own actions had played a role in these events. My weakness had allowed Daniel to take advantage, just as it had with Ethan. I decided I had to take control. I couldn't let this cycle of sin continue. Over the next month, I became more vigilant with Ethan, keeping my distance and reacting firmly whenever he tried to get close. A few times, he attempted to force himself on me, but I slapped him, showing him I wouldn't give in. Eventually, he backed off, realizing I was serious. I also told James about Daniel's actions. He was furious and called Victor to confront him. Victor was equally outraged, and though I don't know what punishment Daniel faced, I didn't care. I just wanted to move on. Ethan stopped pursuing me, returning to a more normal life. I heard he'd started dating a girl from school and was spending more time with Sophie, though I didn't ask for details. Our family slowly returned to its usual rhythm. James began paying more attention to me, showing me more affection after the incident with Daniel. Though our intimate life didn't improve much, my heart felt lighter. I no longer lived in fear of being discovered. The affair with Ethan had started quietly and ended just as silently, leaving no visible scars. But deep down, I knew the emotional wounds would never fully heal. Ethan and I could never go back to the innocent mother-son relationship we once had. Still, I found peace in knowing I'd protected my family from further harm. I threw myself into my role as a mother, a wife, and a principal, determined to rebuild the life I'd nearly destroyed. The guilt would always linger, but I was ready to move forward, stronger than before, with my family intact and my dignity restored.